From dust to code, we bridge that gap. No script to wow, no dream to trap. Rewriting, lighting, feedback, rap. All eyes up now, it's ASAP.
Hello everyone and welcome to the ASAP African webinar series. As part of our exciting initiative, It's a Kids World, we're so thrilled to have you with us today as we shine a spotlight on the power of African storytelling, especially children's script writing in Africa. This session is about more than just script writing. It's about reclaiming narratives, amplifying young voices, and inspiring a new generation of African creatives. We're here to explore what it means to write for children in a way that is truthful, imaginative, and deeply rooted in our cultures. And I'm so happy to have with us our special guest, an acclaimed African children's writer whose work has reached global audiences through platforms like Disney Plus and Netflix. Her journey is a powerful example of what's possible when we dare to dream big and tell our stories boldly. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Omotunde, and can you kindly tell us more about yourself before we dive into this very rich conversation?
Thank you. Listening to you just now, I just felt like a big wave of imposter syndrome because I was like, is that really me? I feel like there's so much I'm still struggling with, but it's good to always take stock of how far you've come and appreciate it, because it not only inspires other people, but it inspires me to keep on pushing. Like, if I could make it this far, I could definitely make it further. So I don't know, when they say a little bit about me, I usually don't know where to begin. Because I mean, I could go far back as when I was 5 or something. I don't know.
Okay, just tell us what your title and what you're currently working on, and then I guess through our conversations, more will be revealed. So yeah, we can start with them. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm a writer. That's what I do mostly, but I also teach screenwriting and writing for children's animation mostly, but just teach screenwriting. And recently, I became an adjunct lecturer at Pan Atlantic University, where I'm teaching the course in children's media studies as well. So I write both for adults and for children, and I also teach screenwriting. Those are the main things I do now.
Thank you for that very brief introduction. I just want to say before we start the questions, so whether you're an aspiring writer, an educator, a creative professional, or simply passionate about African stories, you're in the right place. And to start the conversation, as mentioned previously, you've obviously worked for the biggest names in global entertainment like Disney Plus and Netflix. So what does it take for a young African writer to break into those international spaces?
At the risk of feeling a bit of a fraud myself, because I feel like a lot for me had to do with, yes, first of all, being prepared ahead of time. Like, okay, the things that I could control was I always wanted to be that writer that had an international standard of writing. So I used to say this even when I started, that I want to be that writer that can write anywhere, but just happens to be a Nigerian writer. Because I do, at the risk of sounding condescending, I know that the Nollywood is where it is now, and for a long time I'd seen the issues with Nollywood in terms of storytelling and screenwriting, not film production. And I knew I wanted to learn to tell stories like on a world-class standard. I didn't want to be that writer that just happens to be good for a Nigerian writer. I just felt like there was a difference. So I always aspired to be like, I want to be able to write anywhere, but just that was what was at the back of my head when I started out learning how to write and stuff. And a lot also has to do with providence, because it's like while I'm there prepping myself, not knowing where this is going to go, when opportunities came, they came big time. because I then got to write on Tinsel, the longest running soap in Nigeria. And at the time, it was being run with South Africans and Nigerians. So, but what happened is because I kept on always putting my best foot forward and always wanting to be the best, when the opportunities came, they automatically would think of me because I'm like one of the best they know because I keep trying to excel and to get better. So an opportunity came to learn writing for children's animation with the South African um, company that wanted to like go into it. Like this was like way back 2016 when barely anything existed at the time, and I was just like, yeah, I was born. So there's a bit of providence, but you always it's like preparation meets. I don't know, the people who get lucky are those who are prepared. I don't know how to, there's some kind of saying that way that when because the chance happens to anyone, but if you are prepared, then it looks like you're the luckiest person. So when the opportunity came and I jumped on it, so I learned how to write for children's animation. That I got to meet Natasha Van Necker of Storyteller Pod, and she was so impressed with me that she dragged me on board, and I was now teaching by the next year alongside her for animation. And even as at then, it was still like, where are you going to do? What are you going to do with all this? But I just enjoyed it. But then opportunity meets preparation again because the call came for Netflix. Because at some point, the world is interested in news stories and they are very, very curious about Africa. But the problem is that the quality of content that at that time was coming out of Africa was nowhere near international standards. So the idea was we're going to have to really train a lot of these writers for them to come up. So when the call came for African writers for Netflix, they wanted to do the first animated show. Everyone who knew me was like, "Hey, they are calling you," because they knew like I was that. I used to be very okay. I think another thing you need as an African, you need to be very unrealistic. You need to just you have to be because I remember those days when my daughter was watching Disney and I'd be walking past and I'd look at all those Disney Junior shows and be like, I'm gonna write for Disney one day. Mm. I just to say it like the audacity. Yeah, you just have to be very, very like dream ridiculous things that people will be like, how? Like in what world? But then the call for Netflix came and I already had like spec scripts that had been sitting there for over a year. And I was like, which one do you want? Like, they got
I
just
like
like,
that.
I know. And then so when I was shortlisted and then that's how I got to write on it. And that just took me into that whole world. And then Natasha as well, she introduced me to Annecy, the animation film festival there. So I just discovered this whole world of animation and children's content. And I was like, this is where I want to be. We don't really have much of that in Africa, so it was new for me. So I just felt like this is what and I didn't know how. I had no idea, but I just knew that this is where I wanted to be, and that just kept me always interested in the content, always seeking to learn and improve myself, not just because I loved it. So when the opportunities came, when the call for Netflix, I got in, and then from there I got to do some more work with Triggerfish, South Africa, and there was a call for a show. I've forgotten the name of the show now, but I didn't even get in. But one of the producers now introduced me to the person that's now my agent because she was looking to represent some African or maybe Black writers, and so he sent my name and she met me and she liked me, and then she now got me on other shows. Oh, and the Disney show Kia, that she found me on LinkedIn and she saw how vocal I was, which is another thing for an African writer, you can't be quiet because you don't at the risk of sounding preachy, put your light under a bushel because no one knows who you are, no one knows you exist. So the only way people are going to know you exist is by talking. And that's the use of social media. LinkedIn was my platform to always talk about what I loved about animation or anything I was doing at the time. So when people saw me posting, I've done a couple of shows. That's how I got on Kia for Disney, and there's this show for an Argentinian studio for babies. They wanted an African writer, and they saw that she writes, and they reached out, and that's how I got to work. So that's social media is your friend, even if you don't have an agent. at least just talking about your work, what you're excited about, people are listening. And the good news is that people are really interested in African content now. I think the like we said, we see what's going on in Hollywood and the West and how things are just kind of tough over there. So people are kind of like looking outwards. That's why Asia is really blowing up right now. Africa as well is coming up. Just that people, Africa is still a bit of a dark continent, so a lot of people don't know how to navigate. So if they see someone that's actually talking about these things, they get very excited. Like, oh yes, 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 and then they reach out. So this is a good time for African writers, but you have to step up and improve. Like you have to be world class, world standard. I'm going to say what it is. Our stories need to improve in terms of structure. We have great ideas, we have great concepts, but no, stories need to be crafted properly, and that's where we are kind of still trying to get there.
So there's something you said which might be foreign to some people, an agent, which I don't think is something that we have in the African space. Can you explain to people what that means and how that plays in the international spaces?
Okay, so internationally, for writers and I think actors as well, creatives generally, they tend to have like what somebody, maybe either a manager or an agent, someone who represents them. Now, this is the person that goes knocking on doors, that reaches out to the studios, kind of, it basically markets you and pushes you and tries to get you gigs and stuff. And it's always great to have an agent, especially in places like the US and the UK, because there are places an agent has access to that an artist most likely won't. So the idea, especially the big, well, a lot of people, there's the argument, big agencies versus little agencies and all, but the idea is that you want someone that that has access to the executives, the big boys in the major studios, even the minor studios, that can knock on this and be like, oh, this is my clients, look at their work, and so that's how it tends to work in the Western world. In Africa, it's a bit, sometimes you have to know someone yourself, or someone knows someone who knows someone who knows you, and yeah. But I think a few agencies are starting to come up in Africa.
Okay. And just to go back to the preparation thing that you talked about, if somebody obviously is new to the game or to the scene, what kind of preparation do they need to put in place to ensure, like, or to help them get an agent? Because you've touched on it earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking for a writer and actually even an artist, like I know that the graphics people, you have to have something called a portfolio. No one cares about your degrees or if you went to school at all in the arts. Like, yeah, no one really cares. They want to see a sample of your work. They want to know if you say you're a writer or you're an artist. Okay, do you have a portfolio of work, something you've done? Now, for writers, especially if you've never done, if no one has ever commissioned you before, your best bet is to write what we call a spec script, where you take. Okay, so there are two types of spec scripts. There's sometimes you take an existing show that you like, and you write a spec episode, like it's like an imaginary episode, to show how well you know the show, you know the story, you know the characters, you know everything, and you're able to like come up with a brand new idea as if you were in the writers' room with the other writers. That shows, one, your creativity, and two, your ability to blend into an existing writing team. So that's one, especially if you're very new. But then there's also the spec script where you're writing your own idea, your own, which is also good to have, especially for short. And specs usually work better for, because no one wants to read like a 2 hour spec. I mean, yeah, not when you're new. No one. Yeah, but if it's a short thing, maybe a 5 minute, 10 minute thing, and it's a spec script. Yeah, people curiosity, people would take time to read that as well. So you have you can even have a combination of both in your portfolio, depending on what kind of writing you like. If you like writing a particular genre, then have spec scripts in that genre. So like, since I learned writing for children's animation, I had spec scripts for Fifi and the Flower Tots, My Big Friend, and King Arthur's Disasters. Then I had one of Peppa. I know, right? Then I had one of Peppa Pig. The first three was in Natasha's course. Because if you notice, the three shows were like different age groups, getting more complicated. Yeah, so that was my journey. And then because I just love Peppa Pig so much, I did a spec script of Peppa Pig. I know. So
Interesting.
I had those ones floating around. And for live action, there was a show that I really liked here in Nigeria that I wrote a spec episode of that show, and I sent an email. I sent it to one of the producers at the time, and I think they really appreciated it, but there was really not much they could do going further. So at least I got to know that, okay, at least I'm not doing too badly. You get that feedback because people will be like, oh wow, it really feels like an episode of the show, and then writing stuff on your own. So if you are new as an African or anywhere really, and you're starting out, you want to kind of have those that's all you have going for you. So you want to put that under your belt, have a nice, rich portfolio of that. So if someone says, "Oh, do you have something in this genre that you like?" Well, oh, yeah, sure, I have this and stuff, and you can use that to shop yourself around, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting you're saying that because within the last year and a half, since I found out that I'm really passionate about animation and I want to be in the animation space, I've actually taken the same course that you mentioned, and I've got like 4 spec scripts. So the
there you
Adventures of
go.
Paw Patrol,
Oh,
Captain Underpants, and Daniel Tiger Woods. And just
nice.
today, I have just like through the course that I did to write your pilot episode. Just today, I have just done the first draft of my pilot episode for my own show. And I remember the
Wow.
previous I did, it was like 21 pages. When I looked at it today, I was like, oh my God. But I could see the progress. And today I just finished the draft copy and it was 14 pages. And I'm so proud of myself. But as you said, it's all
Yeah.
about preparation and hard work and just being open to receiving criticism
Feedback.
and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So yes, yeah, I can testify to that. It does work. So yeah, I'm just preparing myself to put myself out there too. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
notice that it also does a lot for your self-confidence
oh yes, I can
as a writer. Like, yeah, because sometimes it's so intimidating meeting other writers and like, oh my God, where do I start? But since you've kind of done all this on your own, when eventually you get into a shared space with other writers, you
yeah,
don't feel so intimidated.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And you find that you have, especially even in the course that we did with Natasha, like you find that everybody has different views and you're complementing each other. You're not competing with
Yes,
each other because there's room
exactly.
for everybody. So yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So this then leads me to my other question. So like in our culture, our African cultures, like many African cultures, the phrase children should be seen, not heard is still very common today. How do you challenge that belief through your writing?
It's not easy, but it's a little bit at a time because these are things that funniest thing is that a lot is changing now because I mean Africa is becoming more well, I mean the world has become a village where everyone things are being shifted. Influences are coming from outside Africa. People are watching Western shows and stuff. So I don't think it's as strong as it was before. But still, I don't think it's that children. I think they just don't think in terms of, oh, let's do something for the kids, except if it's to like I think it's just still a new shift in the mental thinking, and I don't think it's coming from a place of meanness or anything. I think it's just that they just never really thought of it in to that extent. And like you said, we still come from a culture where children, like you said, are seen, not heard. So a child speaking up or being bold or just can be seen as being rude or being so there's also that as well. So it's still tricky. And in our societies in Africa now, most of the time, you just keep your kids in a particular space until they come of age and then you toss them out. So it's almost like you don't bother to even try to understand from the children's point of view what's going on. You do as I tell you or else kind of thing.
Um, okay. So this leads me again to the next question. Why is it important for us as Africans, especially? Because I feel like other places, especially in the Asian continent, they're doing it. Um, but why is it important for us to tell our stories to our kids instead of relying on imported narratives that is not even told by us? And even if it still has to fit into this box that along the way like it loses its authenticity along the way, or
Yeah.
is watered down. So yeah, why is it important that we're the ones that tell our stories to the kids, to
Uh,
our kids? Yeah.
because well, it's because we what we're seeing now, and it's really playing out in a lot of African societies, modern African societies especially, is there seems to be a disconnect with the kids. There are a lot of children in Nigeria, I don't know about other countries, who speak with foreign accents, but they've never been abroad because they were raised watching Disney, Nickelodeon. That's all they grew up watching. And for some parents, they actually like it because it's a flex. So they actually take the children to schools that can teach English in a British accent because to them it's a, oh yeah, my child speaks, you know. But then there's also this thing where, because a lot of parents are, well, adults are realizing this late, that their children know nothing of their culture, even though they live right in it. So they, because many people, like before when we were growing up, they always had that thing of maybe there's always going to the village, and a lot of our cultural things was bled into our everyday life. But now, if you live in the city, you can be totally disconnected from what's happening even around you because you don't go out, you don't get to ride in the buses or hang out with the kids, so you really don't know. All you know of life is whatever you see on Disney, Nickelodeon, and so you don't even know anything about the town in which you live in. Talk less of cultural practices. Remember all those songs in local languages for Cultural Day that we used to sing, and stories. I don't know if they still tell all those tales by moonlighty kind of stories with the tortoise,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there are so many things, and even of course, and when you get to travel to the village, you get to see a lot of things or hear about a lot of things, but there seems to be this disconnect now with the younger generation where not only do they not know, but they don't care. And I think it's the not caring part that's the saddest one, because even if you tell them, they're like, yeah, I don't care. And so when that disconnect happens, the older generation, they are so busy making a life, and they don't stop because children are seen, not heard. By the time they realize that their children don't even care about the culture they live in, children tend to be like teenagers or older, and there's already that disconnect, and it's like it's not too late to fix it. It's like the older people realize the breach when it's way too late, and then it now becomes a case of how do we connect, and by then the older kid doesn't care anymore because they've moved on. So it's, and I see that happening even abroad. Like I see a lot of African families in the UK, especially, where there seems to be this gap between them and their kids, where they don't seem to be able to connect with their kids, and the kids are connecting with people on the street and want nothing to do with their parents because I think there was a time when the child wanted to connect and the parents couldn't be bothered then because they were too busy chasing life or trying to make a living. And then the child decided they looked elsewhere. And so it's almost like it's really is a tragic story. So I feel like if early on we start to bleed in these things in little ways from when they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's why the content for African kids is very important. Every child, a, the typical Nigerian kid grows up watching content for Western kids, so they think with a Western way of thinking. So if you now want to bring in a traditional way of thinking, that may not, it's not, sometimes they align, sometimes they don't. But if they bring something that's totally off what they are used to, they wonder, why should I have to accept this? Because I didn't grow up thinking this way. Even you never brought it to me all this time. Now all of a sudden I'm a older kid and I'm kind of established my way. So it's really important a child grows up seeing themselves represented. And then secondly, there's also, that's for kids who even have access to Western media. For the poorer kids who have no kind of they grow up basically watching adult stuff early,
That's
and
right.
that's another dangerous thing. So a lot of, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like things that they're not meant to be exposed to because they're too young, they get exposed to it way too early. And yeah, that's just another
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're working globally, but you're rooted in Nigeria.
Yeah.
How do you keep your cultural authenticity while appealing to the global audience?
Funny enough, I think a more because if I'm still here, the question will be, how do I not overbleed my cultural authenticity? Because it's like I'm right here, like so. For example, when I'm teaching, when I was teaching my class with international students, the first time I really worried that they wouldn't understand me because of my accent.
I was one of your
So
first students. I just want to say I was one of
I
your
I know, but I used to worry. So what I did was I would try to slow, like I would try not to talk too fast because a friend of mine that works in radio says it's not about the accent. It's about being able to enunciate and
That's right.
pronounce each word correctly. Like once you are able to do that, your
Mm.
accent is funny enough. Ironically, some people actually like the accent, but
I
I don't
was
know.
one.
People keep telling me I sound Jamaican. I'm like, no, I sound Jamaican.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't about the accent. It was finally seeing a Black woman in a space where, first of all, there are not a lot of us, and then a Black woman from Nigeria teaching, not even being a student like me, but teaching. It was like,
Yeah.
wow. I remember we walked. Oh, yeah, I forgot to say, one of my other scripts is Bluey's script. So I remember, and it was Bluey.
Yay!
And I was like, wow. And at that time, that's when Bluey was at its, I don't know if it's still,
Yeah, but it was like
yeah,
big.
yeah.
I think it's still kind of big. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's big, but I think like other shows or whatever is happening around the world has overpowered it. But at one point, the spotlight was on Bluey, and then to have you run that class on Bluey, and that was, I think that for me, that was the catalyst that started my whole journey into wanting to be a professional script writer and taking those courses that enabled me to have multiple spec scripts. But yeah, I just wanted to say, like, it was, yeah, you inspired
Yeah.
me. Like the
Oh.
accent. Who cares about the accent? It's the talent at the end of the day. So yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. So the
Oh,
next question,
thank you.
you're welcome. What's one story from your childhood that you wished had been told, or you wished you've seen it, or is sorry, what's one story from your childhood that you wish you have seen on screen when you're growing up, and if not, have you written it yet?
Hmm. I am not really sure. One story from my childhood, probably, which I do intend to write. Uh, like the way our schools are structured here in Nigeria, especially, and I think it might be like that for other African countries. It's really unique and different. Um, and okay, so I actually well, I'm in plans with some other, like I have two friends, animators, Damilola and Esther, like something as simple as our break time in Nigeria, like and I know that a lot of schools here still have it, where the games we used to play, the songs we used to sing, it's just you don't like, or even just think games like Tente and all those like unique things that we just
Yes.
like they once I say it, if you know what I'm talking about, you will smile. Like you will
Yes.
smile because it's like, but it's nothing like that. Where
Mm.
because now it's like you need gadgets and toys to have fun. We had fun with our hands and feet. We didn't even have
And
shoes and our
yep.
imagination, like, and just how just that sense, and then being able to how our folk tales had always had the song and had and the way we sing here is it's very choral, like the chorus is everyone sings along, so it kind of everyone is singing together, and it just helps build that bond, that kumbaya kind of thing, which we take totally for granted over here.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so that's something we grew up with. Well, a lot of us. If you weren't like rich and kept in some ivory tower somewhere, but if you're just a typical middle class kid or lower income, you go. And I feel like the world really could use a bit of that,
yes.
especially
Yes.
now. And
Mm.
I feel like that's something I'd really love to like just
Mm.
I don't know, just stories like that, that just that sense of community, because I think the world, it's weird. We've become a global village, but we are more disconnected than ever. That's the
Yeah.
irony.
Yeah.
We are all connected. across the world, but everyone is on their you go to a typical group and everyone is on their cell phones. No one is talking with each other. And it's
Yes.
just sad. It's just sad.
Yes.
So I think that's something I feel Africa can offer, because maybe because we're not yet so technology, I mean we are, but there's still that sense of community and that sense of thing.
Yeah.
And even though it's starting to erode in some places, but I feel like that's one good thing we have that I really would like to like
Oh, that would be
push out
beautiful.
there.
That would be
Yeah.
beautiful. Because here, like even here, like I get so excited. I'm sure people look at me like she's crazy when I see kids outside playing because they're not in front.
Yes.
And it saddens me,
Yes.
like when I go to restaurants, I see a family, even a baby's, they got tablets, the dad is on the
Oh,
phone, the mom is on the phone, the other child is on the phone. I'm like, come on now, you guys are out, like connect with the child. Like it's sad. It's really sad. I hope, we'll go back to the way where, phones kept aside, proper chat, like get to
just
know each other. Yeah.
look into each other's eyes. Like I need to
Yeah.
know, like, oh, you got a new pimple. I know, so
Yeah.
it's just something,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
totally intimate, but at the same time not important. Like, but it's connection on
That's
a very primal level. Like we are losing as humans,
yeah.
and yeah.
Sad. Yeah. So in what ways does writing for children like give you the power to tell the truth in ways that adults content sometimes can't?
Um, there's a freshness to children's content, and I think there's an innocence to it. And because you're being so innocent, you can be as genuine as you need to be, because you're coming from a place of of innocence and purity. Whereas for adults, there's always that second guessing, like, okay, he says the water is blue, but when he says blue, what does he mean? Like
Yeah.
everything seems to have like subtext and deep meaning, and what they're saying may not be it depends on what like in a court of law they'll be like, oh, when I said I was bankrupt, I didn't actually mean this, where words are twisted, and it's just
Yeah.
messy. Yeah, I wrote for soap for over 10 years, so I know. But for kids, it's just this freshness, this it's not like you're less brilliant, but there's this innocence about it, and where you're coming from a place of I'm not saying that adults can't be genuine, but for kids, I think it's just that thing of from the mind of a child kind of thing, that's innocence. Yeah. So and I think it's a very precious thing that we lose as we get older.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like if a kid ever tells you you're looking good,
They're being
like,
honest. They're not lying.
yes, like,
When I get
but
that
if an ad
big smile, it's like, oh my
for
God.
the entire day. But if a man comes to you and tells you that you're looking good, your first thought is, what do you want?
Yes.
And even if a lady tells you you're looking good, you kind of wonder that, okay, is this coming from a place of envy? Is this coming from, like, there's so many questions. But with a child, you just take it, okay? The child, so you see,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that innocence yeah, it's there. Yeah,
Lack
that
of
pure.
guile, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the best part about being an African writer, or particularly an African children's writer today? And what keeps you hopeful in the face of industry challenges that we're facing both within Africa and outside of Africa?
Mm. The best thing about being an African writer, generally, whether for children or for adults, is freshness. The world has kind of gotten saturated with Hollywood, and that's the reason why Asian stuff is really coming up. But even that, people have had a lot of that. Africa is still seen as a dark continent of sorts, where they're curious about Africa, but they don't really get a lot of the stories. That's why the few stories that come out are really, really being so, like, Disney has Iyanu, and then there was a few one other one, and then of course there's Skia that came out last year. It's still early stages, but there's a lot of curiosity about Africa. So if we can take advantage of that and leverage that and push it out there, I feel like good things could come of that. There's always people are always excited when they hear, oh yeah, a writer from Africa. Oh wow, there's always that eagerness. Like, okay, there's a PBS show that I wrote on. It should be coming out like next month. Um, Weather Hunters on PBS. And I was the only African writer, and they were so excited to have me on board. Like, oh, and because of that, they had a Christmas special where the family goes to Africa. And I was like cultural consultant. Like, they were so excited to have an African writer on board.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you for, being still hopeful, and hopefully people listening to this will realize that there are so many opportunities out there. You just
Yeah.
have to work and put the preparation, do the
Yeah.
prepare.
And our music industry has really done a lot as well. I mean, Afrobeat is taking the world by storm. Everybody now wants to speak pidgin English or try fufu or amala. So it's like Nigeria, especially, we really. So this is a good time to push yourself as a an African writer, because right now it's like, oh yeah, in the entertainment space, Africans are really like killing it and stuff. Yeah.
And following that, many people think like the resources to create like world-class content are not available in Africa. What would you say to that?
Um, I would say yes and no. It's complicated. If you mean in terms of money, we
Yeah, yes,
the money is technically the money is there
So
technically,
they,
but the problem is that people don't realize, first of all, the need for it, and then secondly, it costs a lot to create animation shows and stuff. And Nollywood films, like you said, like there's always a joke about the Nollywood film that was done in 2 weeks or came out in a month, and when you watch it, you see why. Like, but for children's content, you kind of have to put in a lot more effort, time, money, and so because it's kind of a bit challenging convincing the um marketers, the Nollywood people, that, oh, instead of sinking this money into this film that will come out in 2 weeks and then you get your money back, let's sink it into children's content that might take a far longer time, require more work, more talent, more of everything. And even then, how exactly you would get your money back, it's not quite, a lot of things haven't been set up. The mechanism is still
Yeah.
a bit tricky. So that's why I said, so for that, it's not as straightforward. Disney spent decades, probably over a century, perfecting their and brand, marketing, everything. So it's like they have a pipeline that works, it's automatic. We would have to start setting that up here. So, and that would require a lot of resources that a lot of people may not think is worth the effort for the
I
return.
think it's also
Yeah.
educating them and making them aware, because I feel
Yeah.
like because when I think of animation, it's not just animation. There's a whole industry, the merchandising side of things, that, or brand licensing, that in
Yeah.
itself, the money that could be made, as you said, it's all about putting that infrastructure in place. Like
Yeah.
that could take like the African creative industry to a whole new level if done well,
Yeah.
and if people are patient to try
Yeah.
and error fix. Because obviously the Western world, they didn't get there overnight.
And yeah, of course, of course. Yeah.
So it's just,
Yeah.
educating
Yeah,
people and really
yeah, there are a few companies, there are a few studios that are interested and they are pushing it. Like, I've worked with a few people and they are trying to put out African stuff, animated films, content shows, but it's still we're still in the early stages. But so yeah, we are coming up. It might take a while, but yeah, so a lot of people are kind of in that headspace and they are trying to use the whatever it is they have to push. But it's still early days, so we
okay,
still have a long way to go.
so
Yeah, there
there's
you know
like
that definitely there's a lot of interest. Even the fact that I'm a lecturer in
yeah,
teaching children's media is
yeah,
another evidence of it, because the school itself decided to create a new course for children's media because they saw the need for focus on children's media. So they literally created the course, and then they called me to come and take it because they felt I'd be the best person to take it. That was literally how it happened. So I'm teaching a brand new course, creating a new basically charting new territory at this point.
oh, that's
Yeah.
good. So what would you say the biggest misconceptions international platforms have about African children's content, and how do we correct them?
I don't, okay, I'm not really sure from the point of view what they think, but I know what I think. Because
Okay.
okay, so we've been teaching my class like media for children, and we're going to various age groups from 0 to 3 to preschool to, and so what we do is that in those age categories we try to find content like, okay,
Mm.
for example, this, it's always a challenge finding African content because, okay, so we get Western content a lot. I mean, they are in various categories and they've been documented. And so, but now you
Yeah.
want to find a show for 6 to 8 year olds, that age, and you are searching and searching for African content, especially, and it's hard to find, really, really hard to find. And then when you find what exactly is there, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm an African, so yeah, at the risk of sounding self-hating, there's a lot we don't understand because, like we said, when you see regard children as seen but not heard, you don't stop to really think about them and what they need, what their development milestones are. The PBS show that I worked on, we had scientists and psychologists and experts from
Consult.
various fields, consultants, all meeting to like, okay, a child's mental acuity at this age, what can they absorb? Or would this information be too much for them? They were thinking in that regard, doing the science and metrics and all that. For African content, it's just like, oh, let's just find some silly songs to sing and wait. And you can see the lack of effort and the lack of. Oh, and one of my pet peeves is this kind of shows where one woman comes out and then she's talking to children, and she has to like, "Hello, children," and then hello, and where she slows down her speech as if the children are maybe not as maybe they're mentally deficient or something. And I'm like, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
we do this thing in Africa where we talk down to kids, which was
Mm.
something was a pet peeve of mine growing up because I knew that a lot of times they talk to you as if they don't, and you know far more than like it's almost like they're insulting your intelligence. So when my daughter was growing up, when I did this thing where I never spoke baby language, so it was just a personal decision I made. So
Mm.
when she talk her baby, I'll respond as if I was so. Oh yeah, yeah, yes, we're going to like I respond normally without baby talk. And she started saying her first words before she turned one. Before she turned 1 year. Yeah. She was talking before she was walking.
Yeah.
Like, and right now she always has a lot to say. And I feel like, what have I done? Maybe I should have done the baby talk. I don't know. I feel like no, I create like, okay, baby.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
interesting you. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I like so that's the thing. So it's how if you see your child as a like if you're told this child is a genius, there's a way you treat that child compared to you feel like, oh, this child doesn't know anything. So let me talk down to them and like that. Like and the child is looking at you like, what's wrong with this person? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. That's yeah. So I was just saying, like, it was interesting. You talked about how, like, working on that show in PBS and having all these different consultants. Because I'm also working on a product, and I'm also part of like the Children's Media Foundation here, and
Oh,
and
nice.
I've learned so much about like the policies, the
Mm,
guidelines, safeguarding and stuff, and even working with a child expert on a product that I'm working on for under 10, like the type of like the work that the behind the scene work that goes into it. And it's just like
yeah.
mind blowing. And it's exciting at the same time sad for me because I'm like, wow, we probably
We
do
don't
have
have
it,
no, we
but
don't.
this
We don't have such structures over there. It's just somebody feeling like, oh, by this, they should be this. And it's not like any experiments or surveys or anything was done. It's just them feeling, oh, they're just kids. You need to see the literature books for primary schools now. They're horrible.
wow.
They're horrible. Yeah. There's someone I know that she's like 10, so I got to see some of her school books and I'm like,
Wow. Interesting. So yeah, there's more work to be done also from the grassroots and behind the
yes.
scenes, not just what's
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. There's
okay.
so much.
Okay. So what themes or values do you find yourself returning to again and again in your stories, and why do they matter for our kids today?
Mm, for me, my biggest value is positivity
Mm.
because I feel like the world has become it's just getting more and more negative. And even our live shows, our adult shows tend to, I don't know, maybe there's something seductive about the darkness, but people just tend to like the dark stories or stories that tend towards, but so what we don't have that thing of it can be dark. Yeah, I'm not saying that, oh, don't do sad or horror stories, but there was this note of hope that our stories used to have in the 1980s, and there's this sense of like good always triumphs no matter how much evil rages. We don't seem to get that anymore. I don't know, maybe it's just me. So what, but and if a child is growing up in a world where there's no hope, at a point you ask yourself, why bother? What's the point of living even? But so it's almost like, and that you don't, a child shouldn't have to live in such a world. A child needs to live in a world where there's something to hope for. Like even if they are in a war-torn place or a place with famine or ravaging, there needs to be something to hold on to, that if I can do this, I can, something to that would make them push and break out and choose to change their world. Like, and that's the only, that thing is called hope. There's something that you're aiming to, and like regardless of your present circumstances, it's not about having the world perfect, but knowing that you can always make it better, and that there's something in you that can make it better, which is why I call it hope or positivity, like that ray of light in a very dark room kind of thing. And that I keep returning to that, because I mean the world just seems to be we see how the world is today. And I feel like for kids trying to navigate this space, especially when they are not even being considered at all, it's even more important for them to have something to give them some level of hope, or that they can dream or be daydream about, or be unrealistic about. And yeah, so I even I as an adult, I look for that, and I search for that all the time. So talk less of if I was a kid, I think kids would really want that even more. And the second thing I would think is value is to know that they matter.
I like that. That's very deep.
In Africa, it's even as adults, a lot of adults don't think they matter, because we see how our governments are in Africa. Africa is a country right now in terms of that. Yeah, where I mean, people can just die for any reason and no one cares. It's very hard to convince someone that has been struggling, look at them and tell them that you matter. It's not like, I don't know, I don't know how to explain, but it's just something it does to you. Like it makes you feel like, okay, I'm a human being and I matter. So I
Was
feel
it
like that's
you?
one.
No, I'm just saying, was it you that was telling me a story about a bus conductor that broke down
Yes,
crying?
yes. Oh yes. Okay, I'm going to share that story again.
Yes, and it ties into what
Okay.
you're saying.
Yes, oh
Yeah.
my God, yes. Okay, so
Yes.
there was like, in Lagos, just if you're not used to Lagos bus system, the Danfo buses, trust me, it's very hectic. Never a dull moment. And the bus conductors hang on the edge of the buses and they're shouting their bus stops, and it's always very like "Yeah, blah, 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 blah," and stuff like that. So there's this bus conductor that had been very noisy and garrulous and all over the place and getting in passengers and stuff like that. And there was this so there was a girl in the bus, and she was very pretty, like a very pretty, clearly she was of a higher financial like status, but she was in the bus that day. And she was staring at the bus conductor, and then the bus conductor, maybe he was trying to intimidate her. They're like, why are you looking at me? Then he asked her, am I that fine that you're looking at me? And she says yes. And the guy was at a loss for words. Like he wasn't expecting that. Like
Yeah.
he was for stumped into silence. He couldn't even like. And then of course the other people in the bus now started now joining the fun and started teasing on everything. And then when she was coming down, when she got down at her stop, she gave him a kiss on the cheek and then just went off. And the guy was quiet for the rest. This is someone that had been so noisy, so he was quiet. And then it was now the passengers in the bus that were like, oh, conductor, cat got your tongue, like their own, well, in the pidgin version of cat got your tongue kind of thing, like you can't talk again kind of thing. And all of a sudden he started to cry. Like he just started crying, like he was like, he never thought, or he doesn't think in his life he could ever get a girl like that. Like, it hit him like this moment, this rare moment, he can never get a girl like that. And
Mm.
in that moment, he just felt, and then it was now the turn of the passengers. They comforted him and told him, like, no, don't ever give up hope. Life, it never turns out like, don't ever think, you can always do better, and just try to encourage him with their words. But for him, that was just a very sobering moment. Like, at that moment, he didn't, like, someone actually looked at him and didn't care about his status or anything. And that just, I feel like that guy would have gone home with a lot of things. I hope it would have started him on a journey to some new self-awareness or self-improvement. I hope, but I just felt like when someone told me that, I just felt like it was such a beautiful story that I do want to write on it one day. And don't worry, I've shared it. It's a true story, so anybody can do their own version of it. So, five of us could do that same story, and it would be five different stories. So I'm not even bothered. I'm never scared of. I don't get worried about copyright and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't worry about things like that.
So this kind of ties into the second to the last question that I'm going to ask, which is about how do we create characters with stories like that shows our kids that they matter and they can resonate with across all cultures, but like even when it's taken outside of the continent, it still feels African, but also globally appealing. How do we create such characters and stories?
Yeah. Okay, so this is where your training as a writer comes into play and is very important. First of all, there are typical character types that transcend culture and stuff like that. A quiet person in US is a quiet person in Nigeria, kind of thing. But then, like you said, the cultural aspect, this is where your knowledge as an African, you've grown up with people. Even you know yourself, you know your family members, you know how they are and stuff. So writing on a soap for like a decade, you have different characters. I think all my family members, almost all, have had their names used. Or various, or you the character, we're like, I'm going to put bleeding a bit of this brother. Like, there's always someone, and in fact, there's this saying that don't offend a writer. You're going to see yourself in a book or on a show somewhere being mirrored. Maybe not fully the person, but that. So you're, as a human being, you've interacted with so many people, so you want to bring in to make it as authentic as possible. That's why even for Western shows, if they tell you that a character is plastic, it means that the character doesn't feel real. They don't no There's no human connection, and you don't want that. So the uniqueness of being African, of that, because I mean, I could bring in someone that probably mirrors the traits of an area boy in Lagos, and they have nothing like that in the West. But an area boy in Lagos that maybe loves to read in his spare time or something, like, it just
or he's a geek,
or he's a geek, or a geek that just happens to like some kind of yeah. So and that's how you get a character that people can connect with universally, and yet it has that unique thing. Okay, a good example is when we wrote on Super Team 4 for Netflix, which was a Zambian show. But the characters, like, there was the girl that was like the leader, that she was like this straight A student. She was always like, oh, if she had a B, it was like, oh, the end of the world kind of thing. And we have people like that in the US. But she was a Zambian girl. And then there was the one that just liked to eat. She just liked food, and she was always like, and she was just a drama queen. And then there was the one that was like, she's a bit of a tomboy. She likes sports. She does football. But it's a Zambian girl. And then there's the one that she likes to dance. She has a bit of booty. Like, she's like, has hips and stuff. And these are people like anyone in the world, because they basically represented, but the uniqueness to them is that there were these Zambian girls in Lusaka, and they had that. So it's like there's the general thing, but then there's that unique thing that makes you, because I mean, we are two Black women, and of course it's very easy to get lost in the Black women tropes but at the same time, you find out that there are things unique to us that probably may not fit the Black women thing. You clearly love flowers. I like to work out. I like to work
Yes,
out.
that way.
I listen to rock music. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My daughter listens to my daughter is totally into K drama. Like, there's always, or I mean, I love dogs, and I mean, just there's always something. So, which is why you can take the stereotype, or a true gifted writer, a brilliant writer will take a stereotype and then bleed in uniqueness to
Yeah.
have this hybrid that is familiar yet
Mm,
interesting, intriguing, and that comes with practice over time. That comes with
yes.
practice over time. Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, the last question. Let's say a 10-year-old, either from Namibia, Kenya, or Nigeria, watched one of your shows and is like, I want to be a writer. What advice would you give them? Or what would you tell
I'll
them at
give
that?
the same advice that so the person that I'll call my mentor in writing, Anthony Kende Joseph, or if you're like, he never really, he always felt uncomfortable me calling him my mentor. I was starting out writing, and we used to attend the same church, and I told him one day that, oh, I'd love to write. And you know what he told me? If you want to be a writer, write.
I've heard that. Someone also told me that before. Just that.
Just
Just
write.
that.
That's what writers do. We write. And I don't
Um,
know why. It just didn't occur to me. Like, it's so weird. Like, we think of so many things. You go do a course. Write.
yeah.
Right. Just start. It's going to be crap. It's probably going to be rubbish, but you can improve on rubbish. You can't improve on nothing.
No, do you know what? I love that you can improve on rubbish, but yeah, you can't improve on nothing. You heard that, guys, and it's so true.
Yeah.
Just that. I saw somewhere, because I remember when I first started my journey, I was like, oh, I need to have final draft. I have to have the latest script writing program, and I saw a post. I don't know where I saw it randomly. It said you already have what you need, just that. And I
Yeah.
started
Right.
using Word, and
Yeah.
before
Start on Word and grow on that. And then from there, of course, the good news
they're
is
free
that
software out there.
we are in an internet age where every resource is online now. They're actually free writing
Yeah,
software. There are tools, there are websites, there are YouTube pages. There's people giving out free information without you
yep,
paying a dime, except for maybe your
absolutely.
data or something, where you can
Yeah,
literally learn. Do you know that there are screenplays for Hollywood films that you can downplay? I think there's on websites, various websites, where you can download the screenplay of
yes,
existing films to read through it, so you see
I
how
do
it
that
was
all the
written. Yeah,
I
and yeah, no, if you're a screenwriter, it's try
Oh, you
to
have to
read
read.
screenplays.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
watch the film, you read the screenplay, you see how it was treated, how the action line, the dialogue, and just read, and there's so much resources, but all the reading, all the ingesting of information, at some point you need to just write something,
yeah.
and then
I used to
after writing,
yeah,
try to get used to getting feedback, especially
yes,
negative feedback.
yes.
If you're a writer, get used to receiving negative feedback so you don't be that writer that can't ever improve.
Yep,
Yeah.
and just to add on to what you said, also there, like every award season, they release like the scripts for the shows or the films or the series. They're out there and they're free to
Yeah.
download and
Yeah.
see what made it, why, or what made it the way sorry, why it won, like from the storyline, the structure and everything, and even
Yeah.
seeing what I love about this also is like sometimes the script is so different to what you end up seeing on screen.
Yes.
So it just
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
then goes back to what you said about feedback. Like, don't get too attached to your work because by the time it reaches the final phase, like you'll be like, oh, hold on, I don't remember seeing that in there. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, so yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for such an inspiring and insightful conversation.
Thank you. The time went by so fast. I had to look at the time.
You're right.
Oh, is that the time?
All right. Thank you so much for not only sharing your wisdom, but also the passion for storytelling, your honesty about the whole process, your commitment to lifting up African, not just kids, but also up and coming writers through the power of your words. So thank you so much. And
Thank
guys,
you.
as we have heard today, we already have everything we need to tell our stories, our truth, our heritage, our imagination. they're not just enough, sorry, they're extraordinary. So
Yeah.
I guess this is a call to action. If you're a young writer or even old writer or someone that wants to get into this space and you're out there wondering if your story matters. Yes, it does. And you
Yes, it
also
does.
matter. Yes.
Yeah.
And if you've ever doubted whether Africa can shape the future of children's media, you know now that there are people already doing it ahead of you. So get on board the moving train, because the train is going to start moving very fast. It's going to start running on fast speed. So yeah, thank you all for joining us, and stay connected for more of ASAP's African webinar series. And because it's a kid's world, they deserve the very best of our stories. So thank you so much once more. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.